Box, as it's known, is basically an HTML div. And I could draw right down here, which is basically going to be this sidebar. And I can start to stylize it. So you can see right over here, I can stylize this any way I want, add any sort of gradient, and work from that. But this is cool that I'm actually working with, as I round those corners, I'm working with CSS. Okay, so I'm creating this CSS. It's like, there's this HTML layer that I'm designing on, basically. So I know my design is going to be interpreted correctly. I can create what I need to. In fact, just drop in a drop shadow right in here, adding a color, and then controlling that drop shadow. Let's have it go off to the side, kind of down like that, to the lower right, just like that. So I like being able to do this, inserting what I need to. In fact, going beyond that, if we want to get into text, I can jump in and add some text. Okay, so right in here, changing what I need to, but you can see this word history. I can go beyond our normal fonts, our typical system fonts, and start to use fonts from Adobe Edge Web Fonts. Okay, so those will load up right here, or if you already have some loaded, they'll actually appear at the top of the list. So you can always change that to what you need to. As I'm doing here, let me up the size so you can see that a little better. And this is what I want. As a designer, I want this sort of control to be able to interpret my design correctly. Okay, so let's move on. I can add, for instance, that HTML piece up at the top just as a placeholder. I can drop in that HTML. Selecting that, placing it in there as a placeholder. There's my Edge animation. Yes, there it is. All those fun graphics animating out, and I can start to work with this. But this is called reflow, so it's not just about designing content. I can start to see how the content reflows on different screens. So as I scale it down, I can say, about 900 pixels. This is really where the design starts to break down. So I'm going to add a breakpoint. Adding that breakpoint, add about 800, 900, 899, sure, at that point, at that screen size. And then I can start to adjust this content. So since these photos are getting crammed in there, I can select one and say, hey, you know what? Maybe I want to turn your display to none. Okay? I can change that to none so it's not seen. And then I can start to adjust these either visually or using the panel off to the side. So adjusting this accordingly for the tablet view, I can create that layout. So I don't have to come up with a new comp if I'm in Photoshop or deal with sort of reworking the page. It's literally just kind of working this new content for this layout. So again, tablet view, stretching it out. We go from 4 down to 3. Scaling it down some more. Yeah, let's make it nice and tight, about 500. Adding another breakpoint for mobile. That adds actually a media query. Now I can start to adjust this content however I want. Again, just kind of turning off some of these things. And let me just turn off those grid lines so you can see this content a little better. But you can see how I'm able to adjust all this content as I'm doing now. Specifically for mobile, okay? I want this to be optimized for mobile. In fact, for this animation up at the top, I want to hide it as well for mobile. Making it nice and clean, enabling them to get right to the content. I'll wrap that down just like that, scale that out, and start to adjust this content, as you can see. So I have full control. Again, what's going on behind the scenes? We have CSS taking place. So if we take a look at this content, in fact, let's take a look at this photo right here. Oh, look, right down here, I know it might be kind of hard to see, but there we can see the CSS. Not only the default, but the overrides for the tablet and the mobile. Copy this, export it, whatever you need to do, integrate that with the real content. Okay, and that's what you have. That's how you establish, that whole design for different pages. So,
1.0, we're making that available as a perpetual license for free. It's a kind of a way to say thank you to the community for helping drive the development of that. But again, all the tools and services that are talked about, so all the tools and services that you see here are available as a free tier of the Adobe Creative Cloud. Go to html.adobe.com, and you can find out more information about the tools and services. You can sign up and start downloading them today. Well, I don't know about today because the internet's not doing too well, but when you get home, you can download them. Oh, yeah, sorry. Lost my train of thought. Now, of course, if you want to pay for the free or for the full tier of Creative Cloud, you can do that too. It's a great value, and that includes, in addition to all the Edge tools and services, it includes access to the complete Creative Suite, all the creative tools that a lot of you probably are using, such as Photoshop, Illustrator, Fireworks, and so on.
I was wondering how many people have experience with Flash in the audience. So yeah, that's awesome. I knew this crowd was cool. But everybody here knows me as the Flash guy. So why am I here, Sarah? Why?
I've been asked that question many times.
It's because when I go out and talk to Flash developers, a lot of them are freaked out about HTML5. But the thing is there's not this group of web standards animation experts who are going to take your job. They don't exist, right? We're the ones with expertise doing this interactive web stuff, so we're going to be the ones who are going to be doing it in HTML5, CSS, and JavaScript. And a tool like Edge, if you're familiar with, oh yeah, sorry. See, that's the
product
problem.
formerly known as Edge.
You have Edge had a code name of Edge, right? It was so good, so then we decided to take that name and apply it to a whole suite of products. That's why code words should just be serial numbers. You know what I mean? Because you would never want to take that name.
That's not a bad idea.
Yeah. We'll see what happens with that. But what I want to do is to walk you through the basics of using Edge Animate. And it can be very similar to the way in which you worked previously in Flash before. So I'm not going to open up some slick demo assets. I'm literally going to start from scratch and show you it. So you'll notice that the interface, it looks very similar to After Effects, which is no accident. It's actually the UI is taken kind of from the video tool suite, correct?
Yeah.
Yeah. And the tool itself, compared to Flash, which has been around for a long time, we're doing a lot of work with it, but it is a joy to use Edge because it's lightweight, it's brand new, and it's just a nice feel to use this tool. And really, the choice for you, whether you would use that Flash CS6 exporter or Edge, really comes down to, do you want to target Canvas or do you want to target CSS? And that decision is based on many different things, right? Like Canvas, I would say, really good for maybe ads or if you're building an HTML5 game. But the content isn't really accessible and things like that. So that's really what the choice between those two options comes down to. So when I select this here, you can see that by default, it's actually wrapped this image inside of a div tag, which you can see there. So I actually have all of these properties available in the properties panel that are for div tags. But I can actually change this to an image tag if I don't want that div wrapper around it. Now, in this properties panel, essentially what you're seeing are all of the CSS properties that are available to animate on an image tag. Now, excuse me, that lunch is finding its way up. Now if I want to animate this object, so you can do it the same way you would do it in After Effects or in Flash, which is, let's say I wanted to scale this object. So my playhead here is at 0. I could actually set a keyframe for scale right here, and then move the playhead, and it will automatically create those keyframes for me, which is nice. But there are some novel things inside of Edge, which Edge Animate, driving me insane. I'll just call it Animate for now. Is that all right?
Yes.
Okay. And the pin is one of those kind of novel approaches to animation. So if I double click on the playhead, we have this little blue pin. And I can drag this out to, let's say, 1 second. And essentially what that is doing is it's taking all the current properties that are applied to this object. Wherever that pin is, those property settings will be pinned to that part of the timeline. Now from here, I can now adjust things. So let's say I bring this down to 1% scale. I'm going to go in and set the rotation to 360 degrees. And we can see in the timeline, it's gone ahead and created those that transition for me automatically. So now if I actually press a space bar to preview that, a couple of things to point out. If you're a Flash developer, you're probably looking at that like, oh, that's like 12 frames per second, man. That looks horrible. So, because I said that, originally. But you can't judge the performance of this until you actually view it in the browser. So very much like Flash, you can hit Command Enter, and you can view that in the browser to see what the performance actually is, which is really nice. What is this monstrosity of code that I'm imagining that this thing is creating? So let's look. And obviously it's not monstrous. Yeah. So I'm going to save this project. Let's see. Create a new folder called Colors. Okay, so here it is. And what I'm going to first do is to view the source of this page. So when I view the source, let me actually increase the size of this. You can see by default that we essentially have one div here with an ID of stage. And what's happening is this JavaScript up here is actually at runtime injecting all of the stuff into that div, right? So that's one output option. And we can actually see what that generated code looks like if we open the developer tools. And if I scroll down, we can actually see the CSS properties that are actually being, animated. And I could, we can essentially see that it's put in these div elements with all of these inline styles. So that's fine. But what if we wanted to actually, have more semantic markup? So we can do that. If we go to the publish settings, we have a bunch of different options for publishing essentially an Edge project. So the animate deployment package, what is that exactly?
The animate deployment package, this will produce an OAM file, which is an Open Ajax metadata file. This is a file container I was talking about earlier that you can drag and drop this into other applications so you can easily transfer your content. So you just drag it right from your file system into InDesign. You can use it in Dreamweaver. You can use it in Use right now.
So
hopefully
the support
reflow
for
when
this,
it ships.
Yeah, so support for this is burgeoning right now, right? It's like it's happening more and more. Right?
Yeah.
So then the other output option is iBooks for OS X. So if you want to incorporate animated content into that. But let's focus on web. So by default, again, it's exporting that kind of dynamic thing with it. All your stuff is being injected into the div. You can also set it up to use Google Chrome Frame for earlier versions of IE. And we can either, I don't know, how do you do no prompt? It just installs without asking them?
Yeah. Well,
really?
no, it's like it waits to see if you have it, but if you don't, it doesn't.
Oh, okay. Because that would be kind of cool if we could do that. Lots of things I could imagine using that for. But we do have this option for publishing content as static HTML. And I'll show you what that looks like. So I'm just going to publish that out. And we go into the publish directory, open that. And now if I view the source, we can see that for each actual element that's inside of Edge, we have those div tags, in this case the image tag here. And you'll also notice that the text, which is on the button, is down here as well. It's another div element with that text. So if you have a project that's got a lot of text in it, you can choose static, export, and you have access to all these div tags actually in your source rather than it all being injected at runtime. So it's nice to have those two options. All right, I'm afraid we're going to have to say goodbye to the colored circles. Yeah.
CSS filters, which I'm so excited about. 3D transforms. There's lots of stuff that we can do. We are at no shortage of features to implement.
Yeah, and like we've had a lot of good feedback on this tool, but it'd be really great to have the more Flash people actually take Edge and start using it. That's really important feedback because you have those years and years of expertise doing this, and I think that would be great to hear, right?
Yeah, well, this product is built on user feedback. if you're not familiar with what we've been doing with Animate up until now, we have released 7 public previews, each time gathering feedback, taking into consideration what the users want. So really, like, everything that you see inside of Animate is a user-driven feature. Well, pretty much everyone. We actually have a lot of people in this room that have contributed to that, so thank you.
As long as the feedback isn't make it export Flash. You know what
We've gotten that before.
Oh, we have.
Yeah.
We have that. You know, I don't know.
We don't take all the features.
Yeah, so I think that's pretty much it. Mike, do you want to come back up and do your little the MC thing?
Well,
This focus on these technologies, it's a focus on control, and it's also about staying up to date with these standards. Now, you might have heard about Edge Code. We didn't talk about it too much this morning, but to kind of recap. So Edge Code is kind of our distribution of brackets that's really optimized for the Creative Cloud users. So you can think of Edge Code as brackets with a lot of cool Adobe stuff that we've added into it. Now today, in our very first preview of Edge Code, the only major functional difference is that we've built a Edge Web Font integration into Edge Code. Now you can see that's something that's kind of very specific. It actually has the word Edge in it. And so it's not something we would want to push into the open source project. Another thing that we're working on that we showed off, and you can actually see some of the demos online, is a phone gap extension, because we want to start to be able to build phone gap and mobile applications there. Again, very Adobe specific, and it's not something we want to push into the open source project. But both of those things are actually available to be installed into brackets as well. So we don't just say, hey, if you want that stuff, you have to come get Edge Code. You can actually install it into brackets if that's what you're using as well. It's just kind of optimized, a little bit easier, and this is kind of going to be a nice central point to tie a lot of these Edge tools together. As you saw, we're not hiding from code in any of the tools that we're doing. Even our design tools are very code-centric, and so Edge Code is going to play a very central role in bringing all that sort of stuff together and having a consistent environment. So that's the two editors that we have. But as I mentioned, I'm actually here to talk about the open source project and talk about how you guys can get involved. We kind of view brackets as sort of this sandbox where we can start playing around with ideas, especially around in the coding space. Now, brackets kind of got started by this idea around inline editing, which I'm going to show you in a second. And we wanted to start prototyping it just to see how it felt and get it in front of people. And we started prototyping it in HTML, JavaScript, and CSS because it was really easy to prototype in that language. We didn't have to worry about C or Java or anything like that. And that's kind of when it dawned on us. It's like, wow, it's so easy to prototype here. And actually, our prototype was really good. It was actually completely usable. And we felt like we can actually take this and keep going further with it. But it started to dawn on us that this is a perfect place to start experimenting with even more ideas. So we've got a really long and deep, exhaustive list of some interesting things we want to see and try to innovate on. But we realized that it's not just us with ideas. We're seeing them coming from the community. So if we had this sort of sandbox that we could all just sort of experiment with, then we could all sort of pull these things back together. We can get them back out to the world, and we can get them out to the developers. And again, sort of complexity that will start to unravel as you start to get into it. But at the very high level, it's just you and your code. I've got a tree over here, and I've got my code editor. And I can even make this go away, thanks to Ryan Stewart. I don't know where he went, but we even had an evangelist actually coding on this project and making things better. So this is brackets. It's just a nice little editor here. We can start getting into town, writing, JavaScript, CSS, HTML, and any sort of web-related technologies. We have support for like Less right now, and some other ones coming down the pipe. Now, the quick edit is what I wanted to show you, because this is, I think, a little bit different than what you've seen before. So normally, I'm building on an HTML project, and I've got an HTML file, I've got some CSS that's related to it, and JavaScript. And a lot of my day is spent sort of bouncing back and forth. So I'm in HTML, I tweak some CSS, come back to HTML, I go to JavaScript, come back to HTML. And it's this sort of back and forth. Now, traditionally, we've looked at all this sort of stuff as like documents, right? Like pieces of paper sitting on my desk, and I have to pick one up, write something down, pick another one up, and I'm kind of going back and forth. Not really probably the most productive way, and it's definitely not how we think about programming. We don't think about everything as documents, so we think kind of like diving in and out of code. And so that kind of inspired us to do this. Like, because we're so focused on web technologies, we can use that knowledge of those technologies to basically exploit better features. So I'm going to hit our magic key, which is Control-E, while I'm on a body tag. And what this is actually going to do is open up an inline editor. So we actually go out, look at your project, and say, all right, here are all the CSS properties that apply to that body tag. And I can actually sort through these by either clicking on the side or using some keyboard controls. Everything in Edge code is obviously keyboard-driven as well as mouse-driven, so you don't have to take your hands off the keyboard. But the idea is that I get this nice editor that basically shows me that sort of information. I can actually go in here and code it, go back to work, done, right? So I'm in, out, get back to business. Really cool stuff. The nice thing about these inline editors, though, and the philosophy behind them is, we're not hiding anything, right? We probably would have thrown up a window and we would have hidden your code, right? You would have to do something, but then you couldn't see what was behind it. And we know that when we're writing a lot of this code, it's related to the other things, so why hide it? And so you'll notice I've got like line, 20, 21, 22, and then down here it resumes at 23. So we actually didn't hide anything, we actually just pushed the document up and brought that stuff forward.
That's it. Well, there's a lot to take on, and at the end of the party.